Good morning. So Friday morning. Okay, so you are all pepped up for the TEGA night? Yes. Okay, so we have these 6, 7 chairs here. People at the back. Hello. Come, come, come. Quick, quick, quick. So how many of you have ever taken a photograph in your life? Everybody? Okay. And how many of you, after taking a photograph, have thought that, oh, it could have been better? Always. Okay. So the idea, so this is our Rashmi seventh head talk, and the idea, I mean, like I keep repeating the same thing again and again. The idea is to understand from different walks of life, draw inspiration, sometimes learn how things are done in different verticals. So we have had blockchain, we have had poetry where we learned how to do haikus, and then we had mindfulness, we have financial wellness, and so different topics. The next one we are going to do on generative AI. So we have got, I mean, like a very good speaker to talk about that. So uh,
Is that me?
and most of you have gone through various workshops. A lot of GTs you have gone through authentic leadership, being authentic workshop, wherein we looked at the same image and we all interpreted it differently, right? And similarly for leaders, you have gone through empathetic leadership workshop and then how to give feedback. And a lot of you have also gone through conflict management workshops. Everywhere there was one thing common. There was one photo shown to you and everybody was asked to tell what you are seeing in that photo. And everybody interpreted that photo differently. And we all learned that why we all look at the same thing differently is because of our different values and different beliefs, right? And that's the base for creativity, that's the base for innovation, and that's also the base for conflicts. Yes, with me? So today I would request you to learn photography with that lens of how to improve your relationships back on the floor with your superiors, subordinates, how to have a better quality product, right? And how to obviously be a better photographer and have bragging rights with your kids or your spouses or your family or your friends. So I would request Prateek uh, to kind of introduce our speaker and share his thoughts.
Thank you, Hanu. Good morning, everybody. I'm audible at the back? No, just to take a cue from what just Bhanu said on how many of us has... Come. Please come in the front because nobody gives much attention to the front benches from school, I have learned. You can sleep on the first bench. Nobody pays attention. So just taking a clue from what Bhanu just said on how many of us has taken photographs. Everybody has got a mobile phone, everybody takes photographs nowadays. But back in the day, I remember each photograph used to be very precious because there were only 36 chances that you could have. And sometimes it so happened that we did not lock in the films and there were multiple exposures. we have come, then came the modifications with the Photoshop Lightrooms and all. So things have changed quite a lot. It's much easier, but it's not the machines that make a good photograph. It's the perspective in which we see things. And it doesn't end with how we see things when the photographer, but it's open to interpretations of the people who see it. So that's a good photograph when there's some mystery, there's something that's not so explicit. So that way. Now, I've given a very difficult task to introduce Chirodeep here. Difficult because how do you say something about somebody who is so accomplished? So I have done myself a favor. I have jotted down a cheat paper back from the engineering days when you have to have. so, Chirodeep is a multifaceted personality. He's not only just an accomplished photographer now, but in the past he has had multiple hats. As a photographer, as a photojournalist, as an ad person, as a journalist. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is some brief research that I did on this, right? He has been the editor of National Geographic Traveler for India, which is in itself is a huge accomplishment and an acknowledgement of his talent. He has been also the editor of Design and Photography Department of Time Out. And he has authored numerous books. One of them is A Village in Bengal, which is an essay, photographic essay of his ancestral home in Burdwan. So you hail from this vicinity also. So, and also I think he has done a lot of work on not only just in India but globally. He has done not only in villages but also in urban. So he has many photographic books on urban landscapes like Seeing Time for Bombay, then you have the Bombay Then and Now, the 1 Rupee Entrepreneur, the Commuters, right? So I think I just went through on a few of his photos on the net. Also, not only just in India, his work has been displayed in museums across the world, in Japan, in USA, and all over. So without taking much of your time, I hand over the mic to Chirodeep. Thank you for coming here, Chirodeep.
The invitation. Okay, in a little while we'll try and switch these lights off so you can see the screen better. What I'm going to do today is, I was a little conflicted about what I would speak to you all about, okay, because I wasn't at the beginning very sure of what comprised the group. Okay. So one of the ideas I had was to talk about a particular book project that I had done. Then I was speaking with Rashmi after we came here and we changed the plan, so I'll talk to you about something else. So this is a project, he was mentioning about this book that I had done on my ancestral village in Burdwan. This is a project that had eventually become a book. So what I'm going to take you through in this presentation is how the book came to be, okay? Because when I started the project, I was a few years old in my career, and thinking of a book seemed like a very cocky thing, okay? Famous photographers had books. I mean, accomplished photographers had books. I was like a kid who was 4 years, 5 years into my career. I couldn't have a book. You know what I mean? I was looking at books for inspiration. So how could I have a book? I was so new, right? There was another problem, which is that if you want to do a book, you need to have a story to tell. I had no stories to tell. I was again too new. I had practically no life experiences. In the sense that, till I was in college, I wasn't really paying attention to the world around me. I started paying attention to the world consciously, probably after I became a photographer, because that's when I started seeing, okay? That's when I started assimilating. That's when I started storing things away in my head, consciously and unconsciously, a lot of which comes out now as material from my memory archives, okay? So this project also, he was mentioning about film and, those days when we were shooting on film. This is a project that was completely shot on film, given the time that it was shot in, okay? So which meant that you were working with different kind of constraints. What I also want to tell you all is, photography at the end of the day, everything in photography is a variable and many things are a constraint, okay? everything is a variable in the sense, what camera do you use? Okay, there are so many cameras around. For instance, do you use your mobile? Do you use your film camera? Do you use your DSLR? What lens do you use? Where do you stand? Everything, I mean, if you think is a variable here. Here, the problem was I was shooting on film, okay, which meant that one, you were very raw in your career, so the chances of you making mistakes and all was high. You were also you had only say 36 frames to work with. You were relatively young, you had less money, so you had less resources at your disposal. So I would be traveling for those 5 days of Durga Puja. We have a Durga Puja in my family in Bardhaman, which is about close to 270 to 80 years old. Okay. So I would be traveling for those 5 days, and I would go with 5 rolls of film. Okay. So the entire work is essentially shot, if you think about it, with about 65 rolls of film. 65 rolls of film, you can do the math, into 36 is not too many frames. I mean, I think in a week you shoot more photographs on your mobile now. Okay. So you can understand the challenges that one was dealing with, which led to a certain kind of process. I will take you all through that, but let me start by first just taking you all through the pages of the book, okay, so that you at least get to see what the work is. Then we will come back and I will talk you through the process, okay. Can we just, so that's the book, okay. This book came out in 2012, okay. Photographs are an essay. The essay, in the sense, one of the things is I'm not a natural writer, but I think what used to happen is when I was working on this project, this was a project that was 13 years in the making, okay. I would very often share the work in progress in class with my students and things like that. And people would say things. I mean, friends were seeing it, students were seeing it, family was seeing it. I mean, things would, I don't know, they would say things. I mean, ideas would get triggered, ideas would get killed. I mean, all that was happening. So that essay, at one point, my publisher, with whom I was actually sort of venting about how certain things weren't moving, she said, I mean, why isn't all of this in your essay? So the essay is actually about the whole process of doing the book. It's in many ways a sort of word version of what I'm going to talk to you all about, okay. So these are, what you're seeing here is the book as it is, left page and right page, okay. These are just the pages of the essay, but I think I want you all to see this. Doesn't matter what's there, the text over there, but I think just as design, I just want you all to go through it. If you all want me to go a little slow, then you can tell me, yeah. We will come back and start from here again once you have just seen the whole book. Yeah? So mostly all the people who you are seeing here, this is my family. These are uncles, aunts, my parents, cousins, sisters, brothers, that sort of thing. So, you know, in a way, this is a story really of this place that you're seeing. My family doesn't reside here. Okay, everybody is in Calcutta or like I'm in Bombay, they are in other parts of India or abroad. It's during the 5 days of Durga Puja that the family really gathers here and they have a blast. Okay, uh, so so that's the opportunity that there is to photograph. Some others might, who are in Kolkata might land up for other festivals like say Kali Pujo, and we have the Kali Pujo happens at home as well. So Kali Pujo, Rash and things like that, they kind of land up. But mostly nobody stays there. Yeah. So this is really a story of a family uh, and how they kind of, gather around for a festival. So that's what is being photographed here. Okay. I don't know, have you all seen a film called Gamak Ghar? It's a recent film that was actually being shown on this channel called Movie. Uh, it's a film that was doing the circuit, the festival circuit a lot, and many people who saw that film were telling me that this project kind of reminded them of that film. I mean, it's really about one small house where just the old mother is and the family gathers for festivities and goes off. It's a very quiet kind of a film. Uh, but the thing again is this is done about say about 10 years before Gamakghar was made, and also at a time when most photographers weren't really looking inwards. One of the things with us photographers is, we are always photographing other people, okay? So when I began photographing something like this, which was essentially my own family, uh, it was a little disconcerting for most people in the fraternity. They were kind of wondering, I mean, what the hell is this guy doing, okay? Like, I mean, why are you bothering with your family? In fact, I remember at one point, my father got a little exasperated. I think it was about 6-7 years, and I kept telling people that I'm working on a book and working on a book, and the book wasn't happening. So my father at one point got a little riled, and he kind of told me, I mean, what is this thing that you're doing? Why are you so, I mean, what is there about the family? We are not Satyajit Ray's family. We are not Tagore's family. Why are you obsessing about our family? So I think that's the way people were looking at this thing of how, when one was photographing the family. So this is the book, okay? I'm going to go back to the beginning and take you all through the process, okay? So, so you see, I landed up, I've grown up in Bombay, okay? I was telling them I'm more a Bombay boy than a Calcutta boy. I had no sense really of what it meant to be Bengali, okay? I can speak Bangla because that's what I grew up speaking at home in Bombay. I would regularly come to Calcutta, vacations and things like that. I didn't need to go searching for my roots, as a lot of people kept saying when the book came out that, this is me. It's the kind of silly things which people like to say. I wasn't searching for my roots. I was very much rooted, okay? But, so why did this project happen? It happened quite on a lark. I mean, I became a photographer. I had always heard of the pujo that we had because, after pujo, I would call up Calcutta for Bijaya to wish my relatives, grandparents and things like that. I knew that the family is going to this place. The name of this village is Ahmadpur. So that they go to Ahmadpur every year. I've heard my father talk about it and all that, but I had never experienced it. Once I became a photographer and I was in a job and a life was little bit more in my control in the sense that it was not ruled by school vacations and exams and things like that. Bombay, you don't have vacations during Pujo, right? Unlike Kolkata. So I could never be here for Durga Pujo. So once I got a job, I managed to come for Pujo once and I was just gone hook, line and sinker because I had never experienced anything of this kind, the kind that you saw. Many of you all may be familiar with it because you happen to be in this part of the world. I hadn't a clue, okay? It was all totally exotic for me, totally exotic. You know, palm trees, ponds with ducks swimming, you know, men catching fish, you know, all that kind of thing. I'd never seen paddy fields, I'd never seen anything like that. So I happened to be a photographer, I started taking pictures. I went back to Bombay 5 days later, I made prints and I was showing it to some of my friends, okay. There were two kinds of comments that happened, okay. You know, when they would see pictures of the Thakur Dalan, you remember that picture of those ladies standing on the Thakur Dalan with those arches and columns and all. They all were saying, oh, this is like Sanjay Leela Bhansali's Devdas. That was the year when Devdas was released, by the way. The other extreme was people kept saying, oh, this is like Satyajit Ray's Pather Panchali, when they would see pictures like these, okay. These are two extremes. I was obviously enthused by the fact that it was being compared to Pather Panchali, though I had not seen Pather Panchali till then, okay. But the name had familiarity. The comparison with Devdas was irritating me because, you know, it just seemed a little silly. I don't think they understood, but then you realize that the reason for this comparison was because for most people across India, their sense of West Bengal at that point was basically these two extremes. Okay, when you said Durga Pujo or when you said Bengal, village, you know, these were the two extremes of their knowledge. The in-between was very vague and blank. So, you know, how people were responding to the work, I mean, it didn't have any basis, okay. But, you know, this thing of comparison to Pather Panchali kept happening. So I decided that, okay, let me have a look at the film. And I remember these were the days of VCDs, okay. So I remember procuring a VCD from Calcutta and watching the film, and I remember the first time I watched it, I was bored as hell, okay, bored meaning like seriously. Because, you know, I was used to seeing films like Die Hard, you know, more Hollywood pulp, action, you know, things like that, car chases, hot chicks, that sort of thing. I mean, I wasn't used to seeing Pather Panchali, you know. But then this comparison, this thing kept lingering, you know. So I kept trying to watch it, and I think slowly a certain kind of magic began to work, okay. I think a change started to happen. Other kinds of changes were happening, because once I started watching the film and kind of, you know, liking what I was watching, and you realize, my God, it's so unusual, I've never seen anything like this. I've watched the film now probably about some 30 times, okay. I mean, there are dialogues which I can say from memory. I mean, it's like that. It led me to other kinds of things, and this is the nature of education, right? I mean, you are reading something, it gets you interested in another aspect, and you kind of find another book. This is how we kind of would navigate through libraries, or even now what we do in the net, right? One link takes you to the other. So I remember kind of beginning to start looking for other things to do with Ray, and I kind of started finding some of his other films, started watching them, I came across this book, which should probably try reading, called Our Films, Their Films. Okay? It's very lucidly written, nothing high, but just wonderful. If any of you are interested in visual communication, cinema, this is a book to read. I mean, it's just so wonderful how he explains things, and you feel this is the kind of teacher that I would have loved to have. Okay? And I think that's where I think the first seeds of this project were sown somehow. Okay? So I started photographing, and one of the problems, like I mentioned, was my scope of interest at that point was, I thought, okay, I'm going to do these pictures, I'm going to get it published as a photo essay in a magazine, 6, 8 pages, 10 pages. Those days you could get 10 pages in a magazine, okay? And I mean, you were doing this thing, I mean, it even got published in a few places, but then, you kept coming back and saying, I think there's something more that I can shoot. And this kept happening. At one point, then I was like, okay, no, I think I need to, maybe there's a book in here. And like I said, the problem was a couple of things. One is you didn't know how to do a book. Very few photographers in India that time, photographers not like, say, Raghurai or Raghuveer Singh and all, who were doing their books, but it's people who were like at my stage in careers who had ever done books. We had nobody to go to and talk to ask, can you guide me how to do a book? Okay? Second thing, like I said, is I didn't have a story to tell. So if you don't have a story to tell, what is this book that you're doing, right? So I had to figure out what is the story that I want to tell. What did I have at that point? I had about 2 years or 3 years of shooting that I had done. When I started thinking that it's going to be a book, I was already reading Ray. Ray's reading kind of was leading me to Hitchcock. Have you all seen Alfred Hitchcock's films? Yeah? Okay. If you haven't, you should. Hitchcock is another kind of wonderful guy when it comes to understanding visual communication. Okay? There were things that he did which was essentially to provoke reactions from an audience. Okay? This is what we are trying to do as photographers. Okay? When I'm doing pictures, I want a certain kind of response from an audience who I assume is receptive, okay, and sensitive. This is an important thing. So I was also reading and looking at the works of a photographer called W. Eugene Smith. Okay? W. Eugene Smith was really the guy who was considered as the father of the photographic essay. And the more I was reading about these three people, I started to realize that two of them are filmmakers, one of them is one of the most famous photographers in the world, but they're all kind of trying to do similar things. I began to read about an editor called Walter Murch. Walter Murch is an editor who would work with Martin Scorsese and Coppola primarily. And you're reading him and his struggles in trying to put a film together, and you're saying, oh my God, 3 different kinds of people having very similar struggles. What was that struggle? That struggle was to figure a narrative. Okay? Narrative meaning like you could keep doing single pictures, but if you're doing a film, it all has to tie up. One frame after the other, after that a third, after that a fourth and a fifth. There is a sequence. How are you doing this sequence? It's not random. It's when you're writing a book, you're also thinking, okay, I'm writing a page, few pages, that's a chapter. What's the second chapter? What's the third? Is the sequence falling in place? Okay? This is what I was trying to do as a rookie photographer without actually realizing. And suddenly, here were these masters who were kind of informing what I was doing. Now, if you see this, I mean, there was a photograph, towards somewhere in the middle. Can we have the lights off? So these initial photographs are really about your establishing the story, right? You're kind of, I'm taking the viewer into my village. In many ways, I know this and you wouldn't. It's actually a fairly linear kind of narrative that is happening. Okay, so earlier when my family, we would go, my father, my uncles talk about how they would get off at a station called Memory, okay, and then they would take the bullock carts, and the bullock carts would take them home, okay. There would be hay spread out, and they're all going on that. Now, I mean, when I started going, I mean, you would get off at Memory, you could take cycle rickshaws, and later you could take taxis and go home. Now from Calcutta to home, you could just do a straight 2-hour drive. Now, so there were pictures that I was doing. Now these are fairly linear. I mean, in the sense that, this is the kind of things that I would be seeing gradually as I'm entering the village. Okay. You will see later, I will take you all through as to how things changed. Just remember this image, okay, shot through the car window, okay. These are a lot of temples that are kind of scattered around, a lot of which belong to the family, okay, but now in sort of various stages of disrepair and stuff. Another thing is, a lot of these things have been shot on multiple occasions over the years, right? Like this particular place, in one corner of the village used to be something that kind of endlessly fascinated me, okay, because of a certain kind of geometry. So I've photographed this place many, many times, but I think you know it as a photographer when you've got your picture. You see, what happened was, if you can see that little girl there, okay, that girl is really the clincher here. If you can imagine that photograph without the girl, you will realize that there's something amiss. Now, you wouldn't know this if you haven't seen this picture. But I'm saying this is the intuitive nature of the photographer's mind. He knows, okay, when you've got it. This girl was doing some work around, and at one point she came and stood there. But the thing is, you're standing there waiting for the photograph. You want something, and you finally get it. But you're also hoping, like in any photograph, there are essentially two things. Okay, there are moving elements and static elements. So the temple is static, that house is static, but the buffaloes, the gamcha hanging, the trees, because is there breeze, all of that is essentially moving elements. Any movement there could alter the geometry of the frame. So you're waiting and praying. There's a lot of praying in photography, though it may not look like we're devout people, but there's a lot of praying. Okay, this is what we pray for. Okay. Now here again, I mean, so you are also in a way trying to, what you will notice in this book is that there are three kind of spaces that are essentially being documented. One is, the public space, which is the village, okay, like things like these, okay, the outdoors, okay. Then there are places like, if you see, a semi-public, which is like, say, the Thakurdalan that we have, where all members of the family gather, people from the village gather, things like that. Then there's a third space, which is inside the rooms, inside the homes, which are the absolute private, like you see, my aunts kind of sitting and conversing, the family at breakfast, things like that. So as you see in the narrative, one is crisscrossing between these three places, yeah, and that's how, this is what we would do when I'm there for pujo. Okay, I'm in the house, I'm hanging around with my cousins, I'm standing outside, standing behind, near the digi, probably having a smoke, and then kind of going out into the village, in the market, and things like that. So this is the way the book is structured, yeah. Now this is part of the house, okay. So at one point, this particular Thakurdalan that we have is about, when the book was being shot, it was about 125 years old. at one point, I mean, you know, it was getting repaired. So so this is a picture from them, from there when the last bit of the painting is done. It kind of also, uh, you know, in a way kind of works as a photograph, which is, you know, of the house getting ready. But it was actually a more generic uh, event in the whole thing of the house getting done. It wasn't necessarily for the pujo. You know, one of the things that there was an interesting thing that had happened, you know, over the years, you know, my cousins and stuff would be seeing the work that I was doing. You know, I would take a laptop, they would say, oh, show us, ki kore cheez dakha, you know, that kind of thing, and they would look at it. So one of my cousins had just gotten married then, and I hadn't met his wife. That was the first time I was meeting her. So we were all sitting together, and she was sitting next to him, and she kind of whispered, and she said, I mean, what's with these pictures? Even I can shoot them. She didn't know that I'd heard it, but I did. And I think it was fascinating for me because if you look at a lot of these pictures, I mean, that's the sense that you get that, you know, there's a very matter of fact, you know, they're very easy photos to do. You know, it's not dramatic. Okay, these are pictures which anybody can do. My father could do these, you would think. I mean, I know he can't, but I'll tell you how that came to be. And I'm saying this is a very important aspect. You know, in any work of art, be it a novel, be it a film, be it photography, there's a very important element to it, which is what we call as tone of voice. Okay? In the sense that, I'll give you an example, a very extreme example, so you will know. A Satyajit Ray film and a Rohit Shetty film have a different tone of voice. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah? Rohit Shetty cannot make quiet films like, let's say, Charulata. And Satyajit Ray can't make Simba. Right? So, what is the tone of voice? Now, this is something which you are choosing, okay, as a vehicle to communicate, as a technique, it's a very important choice. Now, this hadn't struck me till 1 year, thankfully very early in the game. I was sitting with my cousins, we were sitting behind our house, there is a large pond. We were all sitting there away from our elders because we were smoking, we were sitting behind. And suddenly I noticed a tiny little fish jumped out of the water, okay, and jumped right back in, and it made that plop sound when it hit the water. What was interesting was that sound in that quiet of rural Bengal was deafening. I could hear that sound so clearly. This is a sound which in Calcutta you can't hear, in Bombay I can't hear, in most big cities, or, you know, we will never hear. And it told me something which was very, very important. That important thing, this is the tone of voice that I'm talking about. It told me that the silence of rural Bengal has to be a character in the story. This is like a story. So all the people that you're seeing here are characters in the story. That silence has to be a character that kind of runs through the narrative. So what you will see here are pictures that are very quiet, therefore. Okay? What you will not see are dramatic photographs. Dramatic in the sense, you know, things like, say, the pukur, there's a cycle standing and I'm shooting from behind the wheel of the cycle. You will not see pictures like that, because what it is doing is, when you're being dramatic, what you're actually doing is you're trying to shout, you're trying to attract attention, which would go completely against the grain of the milieu that you're photographing. I'll just give you another example. The way I would photograph Bombay has to be different from the way that I say photograph here, because Bombay, is more vibrant, it's kind of noisy, it's kind of more energetic, it's kind of, so the way you would photograph Bombay needs to be different from the way you're photographing it, right? So this became a very, very important aspect of how the book is constructed. And thankfully this realization dawned very early in the game. So you were able to kind of structure the photographs accordingly. Yeah, so you will perhaps notice that. You might even when you're looking at it say, I mean, come on, I mean, I was looking for dramatic photos, great skies, this, that. But I mean, a routine, understand this is what we are photographing. We are photographing the mundane, we are photographing the routine, life in a village. So it cannot be dramatic, okay? Though this photograph looks dramatic, but I mean, that's how it is. I mean, the Kolabau Chan, this is actually, when I started doing the book, I also realized that what you see here, I said it's a 13-year long documentation. What you see here is actually only the last 10 years of work. The first 3 years, none of the photographs have actually made it to the book. One of the reasons is because many of them were very dramatic, okay, in the way that they were shot, because, I was trying to impress, maybe my friends back in Bombay, maybe magazine editors, and, things like that, or maybe even prove to myself that I was a kick-ass photographer, But this is the only photograph that actually survives from the first 3 years. But this thing is anyway so dramatic. The early morning, on the banks of the pond when the Kolabau Chan is happening. I have photographed this almost every year. It's pretty much the same. Some year the mist will be less and some years it will be more. That's the only difference intrinsically that you see. What you see here in the water, those little patches, it's again very interesting because you realize in the early morning hours how static the place is. There's no breeze. So that's actually the reflection of the clouds on the water. It's like mirror. Okay? So that's the house. This is another advantage of, photographing things over a long period of time. I had photographed, I would see this. I don't know why, but I mean, the first couple of years, I had never noticed the balcony, a vantage point opposite where I was, where I finally photographed it from. My mother, my aunts, Bodhis, everybody would be standing here. I would see it year after year. I'd done pictures from the ground, but there was something never quite happening, until at one point this image happened. These are again, these are things which you can't plan for, though I'll show you later about the kind of planning that went into the thing. Stuff like, say, this image on the left, you can't plan for this because you don't know what's the kind of interaction that's going to happen. This happens every year. So I will get this guy every year, same place, he sits there and he does the same thing. So you can keep doing it, it'll just, so more or less an event that happens every day, year after year, So you just try and improve upon things, maybe the light changes. Just remember this section, we'll come to this. Now, one of the problems for me as a photographer, photographing the Onjuli in the morning was that the Onjuli is usually a sort of this amazing audio-visual experience, right? The Kashur Ghanta, the Dhak, the Shak, this guy reading the Montro, all of that, plus, the smells, the haze, the smoke, all of that. How do you kind of capture all of it in one photograph? Now, thankfully, you're doing a book and you're not stuck having to do this in one picture. So, therefore, what you see here is actually a sequence of the build-up of that whole episode. You will also see later when I show you about how this book was finally, this section was edited down for various constraints that arrived. Uh, Also these kind of pictures that you see, which are the close-ups, okay? This was all planned according to certain kinds of layout that one was trying to. This is another thing that I do, that while I'm working on a story, be it for a magazine or whatever, because I've worked for so long as an editor, my first instinct when I'm looking at a photograph is to say, how's it going to be used? Okay? What's the best way to use it? Will it be used? Can it be used? How can it be displayed? Yeah? So I think it kind of, I remember at one point reading somewhere a very interesting anecdote about Rishikesh Mukherjee. Rishikesh Mukherjee was primarily trained as an editor. Okay? So when he shot his films, he shot it with great economy. Okay, which means that he knew what is going to make the final cut. So he wouldn't just say, chalo aur ek take le lo. Let's do this. Let's shoot from up. Let's shoot from the left. He wouldn't do all that. He knew what the cuts would be. He knew what the sequence would be. So I figured that, maybe that's what was happening with me as the years went by. These again, were pictures that I would try and shoot year after year. And, some years it would work, but then, the next year you would again try and say, okay, let me try and improve upon it a little bit, and then at some point you get it. I was talking to you about that all the people that you see featured here are like characters in the story. I'll tell you about a very peculiar challenge. This, like I said, it's shot over 13 years. You had to be very careful that, these little kids who are being photographed, these are my nephews and nieces. Now they are all grown up, working and things like that. That you have to be careful that they don't get repeated. Now imagine you have photographed this girl here, and somewhere before, if you see a picture of her where she's a little more grown up. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, so you have to be very careful in how you were shooting the book. So even though you're finding interesting pictures, you're always thinking, where is each photograph fitting in the narrative? So this is how I work, okay? And I will show you that format after the thing. One of the things that I used to find very fascinating when I was reading about Satyajit Ray was how he would, in his Kheror Khata, how he would kind of sketch out aspects of the film, okay, scenes, make notes about costume, this, that, dialogue, all kinds of things. I could draw as a kid right through my school and college. I think once I became a photographer, somehow the ability to draw kind of went out of the window for some strange reason. So though I found that as a great thing to be able to do what Ray was doing, I was just unable to kind of do it. So I decided to do the next best thing, which was I created an Excel sheet, okay, which is a matter of great amusement in the photography fraternity around India, because they would say, what's an Excel sheet got to do with photography? It's what accountants use, right? I mean, what are you doing? But I would use this to plot the narrative. Now, what that means is, I'll show it to you all. What that means is that how clearly can you see the story in your head? It's like doing a film script. Before you hit the set, first day of shooting, do you have everything in front of you on paper? Okay? So I know what are the shots, who are the actors, how is it going to be shot, what angle is it going to be shot, everything is there on the paper. What's the dialogue he's going to say, everything is there what's the costume, everything, okay? Now, when you're doing a project like this, it actually becomes that much more complicated because nothing is in your control. It's not like a film set where you're directing people ki aap yahan pe aa jao, aap idhar aa jao, aap upar chad jao. You're not doing any of that. I can't do any of it. It's all live. You're photographing it as it happens. But the thing is, you have that, if you have that, I figured it works very well for me. If I have that Excel sheet, and it took me a while, a couple of years, to plot that Excel sheet. Once that Excel sheet was ready, it was like, you know, you're an architect, you're trying to build, okay, and you have erected a scaffolding. Now that you have erected the scaffolding, you know where the walls are, where the windows are, what's the size of the window and things like that, okay. So for me, for 13 years, I carried the story in my head. So at any point of time, you know, I'm in office, I'm doing something, I'm in the train going to work, I'm at an airport, going somewhere. This is going on in my head. I know the photographs that I've shot. And I'm already thinking, for instance, that photograph, you know, that tight close-up of the Durga face, it was an idea that actually came to me about placing it there while I was on a flight coming to Kolkata many years back. And so I'm saying you're constantly working on it. It's not that you're shooting and then saying, okay, here are the photographs, now let me arrange them. You're shooting to an arrangement, yeah? Now, this again is a photograph that, an episode that has been shot over many, many years, okay, almost every year. The initial few years, I mean, this kid wasn't there, you know. That's my cousin, one of my brothers, and that's my sister-in-law. That's my sister-in-law who was the one who said, oh, I can also do these pictures, by the way. This is their kid. Now, this kid obviously wasn't there in the initial years when I was shooting, so this photograph could not have happened. But this is what I'm saying is the nice part of, you know, just being able to stay on the job, stay on a project for so long. Okay, things happen, you know, which you cannot plan for, but little moments of surprise and chance which kind of happen from time to time. Now, you know, one of the things that I said, you know, the first 3 years, none of the photographs that I shot have been part of the book. One of the problems was that, which I realized as I was working, as I was editing, was that there was a kind of lack of intimacy in the photographs. You know, and as a photographer, you know it. You know that, you know, the person who you're photographing is comfortable with your presence or not. And I think it took about 4 or 5 years for that comfort to kind of set in. You know, when I first landed up, most people in my family, or even in my family, didn't really know me. They knew me as my father's son, you know, their cousin's son, or, you know, something like that. But they didn't know me. It took about 4 or 5 years of me going there continuously, of them seeing me with a camera. It would initially even be jokes. Oh, he's here back with a camera, you know. Then I would tell them, oh, I'm working on a book. And then it became a different kind of excitement for them. Oh, you know, there's a book on us, okay. And slowly, the walls started coming down, the doors started opening, okay. So these were photographs that I could never have done, say, in the first 2 or 3 years when I was doing the project. I didn't have the kind of access. I couldn't be lounging around on the same bed where my aunts and my mother and all are there discussing an impending wedding of my cousin brother. Okay, this is them kind of talking about, oh look, this is the jewelry that we have bought. Okay, this is the kind of moment I would never have been able to shoot, say, in the first couple of years of the project. Okay, this image on the right. Okay. So, you know, this image was interesting because, you know, what had happened, I was debating whether I should include it in the book because I thought it was just way too dramatic as compared to any of the other photographs. I'm kind of just rushing through a little. Yeah. Another thing that you might have realized maybe is that you'll see a lot of pictures of people sitting. Okay. Now this is a pretty deliberate sort of thing that was done in a way as a device to also slow things. It doesn't mean that people are lazy all the time in the village. But you know, at a subconscious level, you will start realizing, you know, when you start seeing it more carefully, you will start seeing pictures like that. If you look at this photograph on the left, it's actually, you know, in my sense, one of the most dramatic photographs in the book. But it's actually been underplayed so much, you know, with the white space played against that little image on the right. You know, what was happening actually in this room was we were a group of about 11 of us cousins. You cannot figure that out when you see this image on the left. It's just my cousin and his wife. They had actually had their first tiff after marriage, I think. So he was being given grief. Okay, but you get that, but you don't understand that there are about 11 other people in the room. So it's also about what you're trying to photograph there, right? I mean, I'll quickly take you all through a bit of that. You know, this photograph was actually right in the beginning. I showed you all a picture of, you know, through the ambassador car window. This photograph was actually shot much earlier, you know, as a way of saying, oh look, I'm on a journey going home. And then you realized that maybe this needs to come later because, you know, the car in a way kind of is you see it more as a symbol of the urban, and the rickshaw therefore, you know, didn't seem to work there. I mean, so the car kind of became a sort of a visual metaphor. So it made more sense in the front. Though they were shot, that picture was shot much later and this was shot much earlier. Okay, I'll just quickly take you all through that. Okay, this is the kind of Excel sheets that I would do. Okay, if you can see it, you know, I would make little notes to myself. This is the larger scaffolding. Okay, and then you're making changes. You know, there were sequences here which aren't there in the final book. But I would tell myself, you know, reshoot this. Or, you know, there was a picture which initially was the opening image. And I'm telling myself, you know, does this really work as an opening image? These are things that I'm considering. So 5 days of the year is when I was shooting. And 360 days is when I was thinking, you know, readying myself for the next 5 days stint. There was a sequence in the beginning, you know, what you see as the car, through the car window. There was a sequence here which was actually shot as the train journey. So, so this is the long Excel sheet, so you can see it right till the end. The book was designed like this initially as a vertical book, you know, left page, right page, okay? Now, there were problems that were arising. So you see, a lot of the pictures have gone out, you know, like these 3 pictures have gone out. That's the only one that has survived, okay? This is a photograph that I shot and I thought I might want to expand on later. It never happened. These are the kind of notes I would make to myself. You know, Kali Pujo, where the boli happens, you know, in the village, I would make notes to say, okay, this is the kind of picture you need to shoot a vertical photograph. And then I'm also asking myself, could it be a portrait or a detail with legs? And so the thing is, can you pre-visualize? This is what the whole game is about, right? There were page numbers in the book. I mean, you know, it seemed a little kind of extra detail, so it was removed. These are all design elements. So you see, this is the photograph where I asked myself, does this work as the first image? Okay. The earliest thing, you know, you had texts like these. So if you remember, if you've seen Charlie Chaplin's films, you know, they would have things what were called as interslides. Okay, so for instance, they'll say, you know, say in Gold Rush, they would say, and then the man trudged up through the snowy hills, you know, in search of gold. You know, and then they'll show a visual of this man climbing up. That was the technique that I was trying to do, and then I realized that my limited writing skills weren't allowing me the economy with words. So that sort of went out at some point. This was another sequence that was planned. Now these sequences aren't there in the book. Yeah, so as you can see, these have all gone out. You know, this one photograph is there, all the others have gone out. See, this was an option. The previous page that you saw, this was an option. And you see how it's all kind of changed the sequence completely. Yeah. You saw that, see, that image of the car, okay, through the car window. That journey from the station to home, or from Calcutta to home, was, I was attempting it like this, okay, through pictures in the train, you know, you're seeing memory station. What was the problem? The problem was, if you look at this sequence here, you're seeing various people, them doing hawkers, you're seeing various things. What you don't know, and it's quite possible, that there are pictures in there which are like, you know, my cousins, my uncles, you know, who are passengers on that journey. But the reason it's not working is because, you know, like in a film, the characters haven't yet been established. So you don't know, are these is this the family traveling or is this some random blokes traveling? So this sequence, if you try and apply logic, you see how it is not working. So it was kind of discontinued, and this is what the 360 days of thinking was all about, okay? These were other, this is the Aruti sequence that I was talking about. What I wanted was the pages to open like that. And this is the problem with book publishing, where you realize that the budget is too high. Your budget is just going off the moment you do something, you know, a little off the beaten path. So we had to kind of figure out how to curtail that thing. So what you had been thinking over and fine-tuning for about 5-6 years, suddenly now had to be recut. Okay, it's a bit like, you know, censors telling ki boss, 4 cut chahiye picture mein, otherwise we can't release it. Now there's a scamper, you trying to kind of figure out how to recut the film to release. It's a bit like that, you know, it's a hugely nuisance. So this is what it finally became, you know, from here, you see. So from 6 pages it became 4, and a couple of images were kind of removed. This is what was being attempted for that breakfast table. What was this one picture? But till you didn't get this picture, this is what you were trying to do. And you know, you can see how weak it actually is, you know. While you're doing it, it all seems as if it's great and stuff. But then when you get that image, you know that it's all kind of useless effort. Yeah? These were other things that were being tried. All of this kind of eventually went out, you know, except this is what it finally came down to. Yeah? You were also thinking of different cover designs because the book was being thought of as vertical. So like I was saying, when I'm shooting, I'm always thinking, how do you use the stuff? Okay, it's not just about taking the pictures, it's about how do you, like even say when I'm putting up stuff on Instagram, I'm kind of thinking, okay, what's the first picture, what's the second, what's the third? So it's not like just putting 10 pictures there, you know. So are you shooting, keeping that in mind, or are you searching in your archives, keeping that in mind, right? See, everything changed, you know, the name of the book, everything sort of changed over time, you know. Yeah, okay, thank you. Questions? I hope it made sense, please. You know, it actually started from a little earlier because it was just after the Onjuli. It was just when the Onjuli was getting over, and the little girl was whining because she had just gotten up from sleep. She was looking for a mother. I saw her there. I knew she's going to come to my sister-in-law. So I was sort of there. You know, I didn't know that I would get a picture. I came there. I saw her whining. The photograph happened when I saw my sister-in-law bend to kind of listen to her. because that's when the picture really kind of happened. You know, that's when that intimate thing of the mother-daughter thing happened. You know, otherwise, till then she was just standing and listening, doing other things, talking to others while the kid is whining. So the moment she bent and she started listening to a kid, that's when, so I was in that vicinity. I was around there. Oh, the temple one. The temple one, yes, I was waiting. Because I knew that she was sort of hovering around. She was doing things, you know, she was putting clothes for drying and all of that. So I was waiting, I was hoping that she would go there. But, you know, you don't know, I mean, you know, whether she will. And I saw her go up to there. I was in a wrong place actually. I was more towards the left. And seeing her go there, I sort of, you know, realigned myself, because that's what it is all about, right? You move, you align yourself, and that's when it happened really, you know. Luckily, the buffalo didn't move. If you remember, the buffalo was just right there. If the buffalo had moved behind or something, it wouldn't matter if the girl was still there, you know. So
The realization that the girl made the difference came post facto.
no, it happened while I was shooting. Because the moment she's there, you're seeing the scene evolve, you know. So, you know, because you're doing this picture and you're kind of moving, looking through the camera, and you're saying, okay, now it's happening, I need to move a little bit here and a little bit here, little lower, and so you know that you're onto something good, but you have to just nail it there, you know. So, yeah.
That is where measurement is so important. You know the exact time.
When you are looking at the mother and daughter conversation, I mean,
Yeah.
it's very dramatic at that point of
Yeah.
time. Okay, because now you have the conversation.
Yes.
Were you ready for that, or you was shooting a sequence from which you picked up? What happened?
No, so this is another interesting thing. You know, since I started my career from, you know, when we were shooting on film, I think we got trained in a way. You know, it got programmed to kind of be frugal. So, you know, because, you know, like I was saying, 36 frames. You know, so you know, and like I said, I would travel with 5 rolls of film. Okay, that's about 150 odd frames. I know, okay, you know, I'm trying to get this, trying to get that. So, you know, while I'm there, the Thakur Dalan people are moving around. I'm also shooting other things. I'm paying attention, okay, they're talking, they are doing this. So a lot of the pictures that you see, you know, this man talking to the priest, you know, my 2 aunts kind of, you know, talking to somebody, all of those were actually shot in that little 15, 20 minutes on the same day. So you're sort of seeing things moving very quickly, doing something, that kind of thing.
Do we have any questions from the back?
How you put this the picture from the car in the beginning and the shadow of the rickshaw at the last?
So I'll just explain that. So you see, when in the earlier design, that picture of this, the shadow of the cycle rickshaw was in the beginning. Because what I was trying to say is, you know, you're making a journey home. So the rickshaw was the journey. Then you realized, you know, once I had done that picture of the car, and you know, you're thinking of various sort of other things, okay? The rest of the thing is falling into place and all that. It made me think that, you see, what is happening? I mean, I'm coming from a very urban setup. First Bombay, then Calcutta, and then into this village. It felt to me that the car, like I said, is a sort of connect with, it's a very urban sort of, you know, as a visual metaphor, you know, and therefore they kind of changed positions. Okay, so the car came in the front where I'm still from the city and I'm kind of going into the village. So that photograph which was shot many years back of the cycle rickshaw, that kind of went in later at a time where I'm kind of going back home before Kali Puja, because after that the Kali Puja sequence starts. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Sir, it's a different question,
Yeah.
not on your project. but many a time I try to take photographs of some of my interest and thing. I always get dissatisfied on the lighting part of it.
Okay.
So how to improve that?
See, one of the things is, so when you say dissatisfied, what would that mean?
I myself is not happy with that picture that I have taken. I wanted to have a better picture with a better lighting.
So, okay, so what, if I'm getting your question right, so one is, you know, for instance, to have a better sense of what is correct light. For instance, say if you are, say if you're in the hills, okay, and you're trying to do a picture, very often people, or like say you're on the beach and you're saying I'm doing a picture of the sunset, okay, you're in Bombay, you're doing a picture of the sunset and you're saying I'm taking a picture of my friend against the sunset. It's quite likely that either your friend's face will be seen clearly or the background will be seen clearly. Now, if we don't understand this, and then I do a picture of, and you realize, oh, I can only see the sunset, my friend's face can't be seen, and then so there's nothing wrong with the lighting there. What's wrong is my understanding of the situation, right? One is that. Second is, let's say you are sitting in a room and you say your friend is there and you say, okay, I want to do a picture of my friend, but he's sitting with his back to the window and you do a picture. Now in this case, you have a chance of asking your friend to move so you get the light from the window on him instead of behind him. You understand? So it's about also sometimes changing to understand where the light is and to then kind of say, okay, can I change? Because every time you don't need to shoot the way it is right in front of you. You can say, okay, can I turn? Is the light better there? You know, so or like let's say, you know, one of the things that people don't realize, like say for instance in Bombay, when people are photographing the VT station, okay, the Victoria Terminal, you will see people, even in the morning they are shooting VT station. You cannot photograph the VT station well in the morning because the sun rises from behind it. In the evening, you get the full force of the sun on it. So it's kind of, it's glowing. Okay, that's the time. But the thing is, on your mobile phone, you know, you will still get some picture of VT. So it's interesting that to say that, you know, I'm dissatisfied means that you're discerning. Okay? And the thing is to then say, okay, do I need to go back in the evening? These are the kind of things that you can do to rectify what is when you see the results are not happening. Yeah?
Did you just intentionally make this photo album in grayscale?
Okay, couple of answers. You know, one is, like I said, I was doing this thing when I was very early in my career, at a time when one didn't have enough money. What we could afford was black and white film. Second, you know, those days newspaper offices had dark rooms. So you could come in and you could process your own rolls. I didn't need to go out, which meant I was saving money. Okay? I had no sense at that time, you know, all this thing of silence, this, that, none of this had occurred to me. This was, you know, about 4 years into the thing. At which point you also realize that maybe black and white is the good thing, because if I'm adding color, it's all noise. You know, if you understand that analogy, then it's all noise. Another aspect was, you know, when I started photographing it, like I said, I was very, very young in my profession. I wasn't, what were we shooting for color? We were shooting color transparencies, meaning slides, which is a very, very unforgiving kind of technology, unlike digital. You know, digital, you do a few pictures and then you say, theek nahi hai, thoda change kar do. Slides, you couldn't do that. What you did, what you shot is what you got. So you had to be technically like very, very strong. You know, your foundation had to be. Obviously at that point my foundation wasn't. So I wasn't very conversant, I wasn't very confident of shooting color. Plus it was very expensive, you know. I mean, it was almost 3 times the cost of shooting a black and white roll. So for me to do that when your foundation is completely shaky and to waste money, I don't think I had the guts to do that. So that's how the black and white, it started out as an accident, as a circumstantial thing, and then it continued.
But in turn, it's accomplished your story. That has
Absolutely.
come and
Oh,
actually-
absolutely. Because then you realize that that's what is working very well. You couldn't have done it in color. You know, I remember many years into the project, once Anil Dharkar was asking me, so why don't you think of doing this in color? And I was telling him, sure, you can do it. By then I was more confident of doing color. I was shooting a lot. But the thing is, I remember telling him, you know, Anil, the thing is, in color, it would have been a different book. Because you see, what you see in color and what you see in black and white is very different. You know, for instance, let's say you're at Kumottuli and you're photographing a day before Pujo where they're carrying all the idols. If you look at, it's very interesting, if you look at, say, the Oshur and all muscled and all that, and the men who are carrying it, if you're not careful while shooting in black and white, you know, it'll all merge. But in color, it may be different because the Oshur is green, the guy is not. You know what I mean? So it requires a different way of seeing. It wouldn't have, you would have to see the project very differently. So, yeah.
So we have time for a last question, if anybody would want to ask something. Okay. So thank you, Chirodeep.
Thank you.
It was a wonderful session,
Thank you.
taking us
Thank
through
you.
this journey
Thank you.
and through your book that you have published.
Thank you.
I would request Vinay sir to please close the session with the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wasn't sure what I'm coming into. I walked into the office and Mr. Mum said there is a TED talk. I said, regarding what? He said, photography. I said, I've come for an important budget meeting. I don't think I can spend time. I don't have 1.5 hours of my schedule. Landed in Calcutta at 5:30 in the morning, sat here. Pratik was lucky, you know, he prepared a cheat sheet to come and say his introductory remarks. So what happened was, thanks to Rashmi, they gave me a pen and a notebook to make notes so that I could use them to say word of thanks. But what was the learning? The learning from today's talk, which was for me an enlightenment, you know, it is not about photography. It's about the passion, how the passion has brought creativity, and how the creativity has taken a few photographs of family members and made a story, and it sells. You see, people who are buying the book don't know that those are all his relatives until unless told them. So, our learning is, if passion can get creativity, make Chirodeep a man what he is, why can't we use that same analogy for our efforts, for our work on a day-to-day basis? He thought of a wear measurement, you know. Always wear measurements up to 5 o'clock, yes. What about after 6 o'clock when you're at home? How about passion or creativity, anything else that we do? Can we also not make a book of our own? Yes, it may not be bestseller, it may not get published, but at least something that can go down the generations for all of you to share with your future generations coming in. Then I was making another note. I said, you know, what has been the difference in this talk today? All of us, there were a lot of questions about photography, not happy, you can use filter, use iPhone 14, you don't even have to have this question, right? But life is not that easy. We are all used to, I have a DSLR Nikon, I must have paid some $300 for it. I always shot it on auto mode. We all do that, right? The moment we get passionate about, okay, I have this expensive piece of equipment, let me learn to use it better, time permitting. The moment you start changing into settings and magnifying lenses, you will realize the same picture that you took with an auto mode and the same picture taken with passion in there would give a different perspective to it. It gives a different perspective to life. What I would say is, it was too little and too short for us to understand the man here. We just saw the village in Bengal. We would love to hear more about the other things that he has done in the same field, whether it was National Geography or other kind of publishings. So I'm sure we'll have you back again.
Certainly.
Thank you so much for an enlightening talk.
Thank you.
And to close, all I can say is thanks to the HR. This is an absolutely fantastic new perspective that I saw today. We never get to see these talks. They are relayed middle of the night for us. But I'm lucky I've been here. Thanks again. Thanks,
Thank
Chirodeep,
you.
for coming
Thank
here.
you. My
On behalf
pleasure.
of the team TEGA.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for it.
Thank you.
So we would just request Emansu to keep
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure to know you.
Same here. Thank you very much.
So this will end the session. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.